Welcome everybody to this week's episode of the podcast. I'm stoked to have this guest on again, my buddy Jon. So hey, Jon,
Hey,
quickly for those that don't know you, who are you? Real
everyone.
quick. Hi everyone.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, which is probably everyone, my name is Jon. I am a whole parent on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and I have a podcast. And basically, I talk about healthy parenting from the perspective of a dad, from the
Mhm.
perspective of a guy. So many of the parenting creators out there are amazing, thoughtful, wise women, and so few are men. And those who are men tend to be people who are, from the academy, from the ivory tower. These are doctors or people who have advanced degrees, PhDs in child development, et cetera. And I am not. So I talk about parenting from the trenches. I have 3 young kids, 7, 2, and 3. That was a weird way to say those in not chronological order. But
Let's talk about that more. What?
yeah,
Kidding.
2, and 3. And yeah, my middle child always coming in last.
Oh,
And 3 boys. And so, as a dad with 3 boys, I feel like so much of the parenting advice that I get is great, but also, it doesn't always apply and it doesn't always land. And so that's
mm,
why I have my account and that's what I talk about, and just trying to be whole people.
yeah.
That's it.
And I'm gonna make this joke again because I'm also a dad, and I said it the first time you're on. It's whole with a W,
It's
people.
whole with a W. But after I was on last time, I did go out and get that username just to be safe.
Yeah,
So,
I'm telling you,
so
I think that's the bread and butter right there is whole parent.
well, and maybe
No W.
someday, maybe someday. I think that here's the thing: like it's so much more than parenting. I
Yeah.
started with parenting because it's something that I'm really passionate about, and also it's
Yeah.
something that I do have some education in, but really, it's so much more than parenting.
Mm,
Being a person in this world, you're so many things, and so whole is a really important word for me because it kind of speaks to the holistic, which is a funny word because it's not spelled with a W, even though it's talking about the W type of whole.
uh-huh.
Um, that was a struggle for me as a dyslexic kid growing up, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But as a holistic mindset of life, you could be a whole partner. You can
Mm,
be right. You can be a whole child. Like
mm,
how do you react to parents who maybe didn't do things perfectly? How do you integrate work life balance? Are those things that you are finding juxtaposed, or are those things that are your work is feeding into and nourishing your life? So that the whole piece is really important, and it's not whole as in like there's a hole in your life without kids. It is really
mm.
like you have to figure out a way to make it all work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think with that definition of what you're kind of bringing these different aspects together and different parts of self, as a parent, as a man, as a work, whatever you do, all these different pieces of ourselves. And it kind of like the purpose of this show is really about being integrated. And
Mm,
as Jon thinks about what it means to be integrated in
yeah.
his life, or what he's doing to create integration, and I akin that similar to being like holistically healthy, right, or balanced, right, or
Right.
whole. I think they're all very similar, saying very similar things. I think what the aim is for all of them is striking some type of healthy balance to be effective. That's why when I think of the name of this podcast being integrated, really another way to say it is being, how do I be effective in all areas of life?
Yep.
Am I being effective?
Yep.
Um, and so what do you think when you think of being integrated in your life now? What is Jon doing? What does it look like for Jon? And what does Jon think about integration?
Yeah, I think integration is such an interesting term, and it's so fun to talk about this and not just to go a little bit deeper here, and not just I feel like whenever I'm on my podcast, so much of it is about parenting.
Mm,
And what I try and say over and over is that oftentimes the thing that's most limiting or most challenging in our parenting journey is actually our work with ourselves. So
mm,
how do we get back to who we are? How do we understand the things that are happening almost to us by us, if
mm,
that makes sense? Like if we don't have the conscious awareness of why we're triggered or whatever, like a lot of that stuff has to do with the fact that the first and most important person that we have to parent is ourselves. And so when I think about being integrated, like I don't know how familiar, Travis, you are with the Enneagram,
hmm
but one of my first like introductions into the personality typing world, which is a world.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's like a whole community of people, and people like go to war and sell their firstborns because they're a Myers-Briggs person or an Enneagram person or this person or that person. And my first introduction into the Enneagram, the Enneagram is this really awesome system that's often really misunderstood and misapplied. My introduction into it was actually most with the integration and disintegration aspects of it. And so when I think about the word integrated, my first thought is Enneagram. And so if
Mm.
you're not familiar, it's this weird 9-pointed shape, looks like a circle with a bunch of intersecting lines in it.
Yeah.
And the lines represent, if you look at the lines clockwise, they represent where you go when you're healthy
Mm.
and at peace and at rest, and when all aspects of your life are fully nourished, and when you are finding the best of yourself, right?
Mm.
Not when you're operating from a scarcity mindset, or when you're just trying to catch up, which is, I feel like, how so many of us live life, is just constantly sleep deprived, constantly overworked, constantly underconnected with. But when you're fully at your best place, wherever
Mm.
that place of Zen is, you actually go and you distribute, or you become and elicit the traits of another number. So the way that the system's set up is it's 9 numbers, and each of them has somewhat unique traits. And so what I learned about myself was, wow, I can see, actually, I can't always tell when I'm integrated or not. I can't tell when I'm acting
Mm.
out of my kind of basis instincts, or when I'm in fight or flight. I have been so conditioned to just operate in a level that is beyond effectiveness or beneath
Mm.
effectiveness, or like just not flourishing, that actually, by looking at this Enneagram system, I could see where I'm exhibiting traits that show that I'm caring for myself.
Mm.
And namely, those traits for my Enneagram type are that I become a person who's committed to others and passionate about caring. And so
Mm.
as a dad, I actually learned that when I'm not connecting with my kids, that means there's something going on in my life that's not okay.
Mm.
And so then I can dig, and then I can get out my journal, or I can go to therapy or whatever, and I can dig and try and figure out, where is that place. So integration for me is just living to the fullest of your potential
Mm.
because you have your basic needs. That's how I would describe it. I think anything beyond that, self actualization, all these other wonderful things, I think if you don't have your basis needs met, I'm a big Abraham Maslow guy. If you don't have your basis needs met, you're not going to be able to do those things. So that's a really roundabout way of saying what I think integrated means is the traits that you are able to offer to the world, the traits
Mm.
that you embody when you are at a place where your needs, your fundamental needs, and also your higher level needs are being met.
Yeah. And I think Enneagram, I'm a 9, those that are wondering.
Okay,
So
I'm an 8.
yeah, I have an 8 wing. I have a 9 with an 8 wing.
Sure.
So yeah,
Two
if you
thirds
don't
of the
know,
people have no idea what we're talking about.
I know it's okay. Hey, if they want to dig deep, they can dig deep. That's you choose your own adventure. Those that are listening, if you want to listen, go. If you want to dig deep, go for it. But no,
The
9 with an 8 wing, and
the
uh,
Enneagram pipeline is a long rabbit trail.
it really is a lot of books. I have like probably 4 different books on the Enneagram in this office.
Yep,
So
there you
anyway,
go.
I'm also fascinated by it, and I think the way they use it, right, is another way to put it is you're moving towards health, right? Another word you could put on there, a more effective space versus kind of I would say maybe even a survival state. I think we move to a more survival-ish state of being when we're in disintegration, and even from like a psychological emotional term, I think being disintegrated is kind of more primitive. It's more survival, and it tends to be in a way where there's a disconnection between like mind and body and soul. There's some like
Yes.
barrier. There's like a miscommunication almost, so to speak, and they're not really hearing each other type of a thing, and they're just trying to just survive in their own little islands. Like my mind's just trying to do one thing, my body's trying to do its other thing, and my soul, whatever you want to call it, spirit, is doing its own thing, and so they're all trying to do it. And then that creates problems in my life, whether with as a parent, if I'm a parent, that could look like with being overworked, overstressed, overtired. That could look like me yelling a ton. That could look like me, I don't know, watching TV at night when the kids are in bed, or drinking too much, or
Right.
any
Right.
slew of things.
Of coping mechanisms, right?
Yeah, and then obviously that has a snowball effect, over the days, weeks, months, years. And disintegration too could, I think, come from a whole bunch of our past experiences, what was taught to us, how we
Oh,
had to
totally.
survive. And I think of a lot of the stuff you've been talking about lately on your Instagram account, which is on yelling, and how what yelling does to your own individual internal state of being as I yell. And not that there's times and places to yell, right? If I'm yelling at a soccer match because I'm cheering my kid on, that's different. I'm talking about like screaming at your kids or
Right.
screaming at your spouse or your partner and saying hurtful things. And when you are not in control type of thing, when you are disintegrated or dysregulated, when you are kind of in that state of anger, aggression, and your own fight, freeze, flight state, and just trying to like seek control, right? That's a state of disintegration.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and it's so interesting to me that you just named, right? Like just to go back to the Enneagram for one more second before people turn this off because they don't know about it. But like as an Enneagram 9, right? So like this is
Mhm.
so like I like have done like trainings on the Enneagram. I'm like
Yeah.
there was a time in my life before I was into parenting when like I could have been an Enneagram creator.
Yeah.
And so as an Enneagram 9, it's really interesting that your integration point would be a 3
Mhm.
and your disintegration point would be a 6,
Yep.
because what you said at the beginning of the podcast was like to be integrated is to be effective, which is
Mhm.
like that's what threes that's like what they're going for, right?
It's
So like
true.
when you're in your best place, you're like, I
Yeah.
just want to be as effective as possible. My wife's a 3, so I know. So like she's at all times just like, wait, are we doing the most effective thing right now?
Mm.
And it's so interesting, like that can be, that can pose like a really negative aspect, but also when you're doing it, you're in a healthy place, and you're going to effectiveness and it works, versus you go to a 6 as a 9 when
Yeah.
you're disintegrated, which is the anxiety place. The negative traits of the 6 are that like highly anxious, which is like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm fight or flight. So
Yeah.
it's for me, when I go disintegrated, I actually don't go to anxiety, although I
Mm.
do. I shouldn't say that. I do, but I go to like isolationist,
Mm.
because I would go to like a 5 as an 8. And so because I go to a 5, I'm just like, let me put my head down and work constantly. Like a lot, my like kind of toxic disintegrated trait when I like need to do something is I just shut everyone out and I close the door and I work until like 4 in the morning
Mm.
without coffee, without nothing, like just grind solo. And I will be
Mm.
like, don't help me. My wife is better at everything than me. So like she could literally come in and do all of my marketing stuff that I need to do or something like better than me. But I'm like, no, don't help me. I'm not healthy.
Mm.
Versus I'm like, that's kind of the beauty of the Enneagram. Like that's what it looks like. I isolate from everyone when I'm disintegrated, versus I reach out to people when I'm integrated. I
Yeah.
go and I try and connect with people. I become a 2.
Mm.
So I'm like, how can I assist and how can I help? And I
Yeah.
think that regardless of all that, right? Like even if you don't subscribe to the Enneagram, or you think it's much of, it's like just a glorified horoscope or whatever, like what we're all identifying in with the Enneagram or whatever, we're just trying to make meaning out
Mm.
of our experiences at
Totally.
the core, right? And in that meaning making process, there's basically 4 different ways that we make meaning. I'm not going to go into like this is kind of my philosophy on these things, but one of the primary ways that we make meaning is just to justify our own existence and
Mm.
to justify our own trauma. And so I think the yelling thing comes a lot from, mostly I would say, from people for whom one of 2 things is true. Either they were yelled at,
Mhm.
or they were told not to process their emotions. They were taught to suppress their emotions.
Sure.
And if it was that they were yelled at, then the justification is my parents loved me because I don't know humans are inherently social creatures. And if your parents didn't love you, it's very disorienting as a social creature. So my
Sure.
parents must have loved me. And this is why abuse and neglect are so harmful, by the way. My parents must have loved me. And at the same time, my parents also yelled at me. And by the way, this goes for hitting as well.
Mm.
My parents
Sure.
loved me,
Yeah.
but they spanked me. My parents loved me, but they locked me in a room by myself for hours at a time. My parents loved me, but whatever traumatic thing. So therefore, if they loved me, I must have deserved it, or I must have earned it, or it must have been effective because the person who I am today came from that. And that would be very disconcerting to me to learn that there's something wrong with me, which I'm not saying there is, but that there was any negative part of my parenting journey,
Mm.
the journey of being parented. And so like I think that that's where it comes from, is people, they have to justify their own parents' actions. And so whether it's whether they're a 9 or a 1 or a 6 or a 4, it doesn't really matter. If
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
yelled at as a kid, you're going to yell because it's a justification and a meaning making of your own
Yeah.
circumstances. And then the other piece is that most of us, especially men, I think this is especially important for men, we're taught that the exhibition of emotion was something to be avoided, right?
Yeah.
Boys don't cry,
Yeah.
rub some dirt on it, That's
Right.
nothing to be disappointed about. I'll give you something to feel sorry about. Like all of these things at their core were
Mm.
about trying to suppress the emotional outbursts of
Yeah.
children, which
Yeah.
they're too big. That's part of having an underdeveloped brain. Your
Yeah.
kid does overreact to things. I'm not
Yes.
saying that it's not an overreaction. It is. It is inappropriate if as an adult had the type of emotional reaction to not getting M&Ms at the grocery store that my 2-year-old does.
Mhm.
It is an
And
overreaction.
I've worked with those people in a therapeutic setting, and there's a term for that, a real psychological diagnosis of
Yeah.
often borderline personality disorder, which tends to essentially be a person who's stuck in the kind of a childlike emotional state where they cannot regulate their emotions. So it does
Yeah.
occur as an adult, and it looks
Right.
much like a 5-year-old where they can't regulate effectively. It's almost like, I don't even like the term borderline personality disorder, by the way. They changed the name. It should be more
Yeah.
emotional dysregulation disorder. Like they can't
Right.
regulate effectively and communicate effectively. We know they're hurting, but it looks like a 5-year-old who said no to having ice cream, right, in the
Right.
store. Right.
Right. And then they lash out and they yell. And so
Mhm.
what winds up happening if you're kind of tracking the process here, right? Like is you were yelled at
Mhm.
either because you couldn't regulate your emotions because your brain wasn't developed enough and your parents didn't know how to regulate their emotions because they were yelled at. So like it just trickles down and then you become a parent and then you start yelling at your kids,
Right.
and then what are your kids going to do? Like they're going to yell at their kids.
Yeah.
So really the reason I talk about this is because it doesn't just have generational impact for us. Like it doesn't just change the way in which you relate to your kids when they're 30, although that's a good enough reason in and of itself. It means that your kids at 30 are going to completely have a different experience of parenting because they're not going to have to go through the same types of problems that you did, and they'll
Right.
have other things to deconstruct. They'll have other problems that you didn't or weren't aware of. They'll
Right.
have problematic things around whatever the thing is in 2050 that they're concerned about then. But
Mm.
at least you will have broken for them the cycle of screaming and shouting. And I think that that's huge.
Yeah, and I think with that, when you are yelled at excessively, not, we all have those one-off moments. And that's,
Sure.
just to differentiate for people listening, I have one-off moments. I'm sure John has one-off moments. That's not really the impactful thing for kids. It's more of the consistence. Like, what's the
Yes.
consistent pattern and behavioral? Not because we all have, I think, to some degree, understand that people make mistakes, and sure, I'll forget. Let's heal and work through it. Those are not talking about that. All
No.
good people even have those moments because we're human. It's more
Yes.
about what's the consistent habitual pattern of behavior. And when you are habitually yelled at as a kid, it does cause, I'm gonna use this word, a disintegration, a fabric, like a splitting, if you will, of an internal psyche. Especially, you talked about being a boy. If you're told don't feel something, or yelled at, or you're told things like don't be such a girl. Huh, that's a fun one.
Right.
Or don't be, you need to man up. Don't cry. That creates a disintegration because that kid, that boy, now has to, in a way, cut off parts of self, repress parts of self, shame parts of self, hide parts of self. Essentially, also he's trying to hide natural occurring phenomenon that is emotional states, which
Yes.
occurs in everybody, psychologically, emotionally, physically, everything. These are natural, normal things to exhibit. And he's being told what is normal is not normal. Well, then that creates a disintegration between mind and body because I have to survive. And so to survive is to say, if I have to be disintegrated, and now that's been my habit from young age to now I'm 30, my whole life, I've lived in essentially a realm of like being disintegrated from self or parts of self. And I have to. Okay, now what? That's normal to me. That's normal to me, quote unquote.
Right.
So now how do I
Well,
change that? Right.
well, and that's yeah. I mean, I think it begins with just a simple acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to answer that question because that question is impossible. But a simple acknowledgement
Yeah.
of the things that you've gone through,
Yeah.
and that alone is a lifetime journey to
Totally.
learn to acknowledge and name the experiences that you've had throughout your life. And I'll just say that you'll appreciate this as a therapist, but whatever you leave not processed, like that is not benign.
Mm.
Like when you don't process through things, whether it was by uh intention or just unintentionally, your parents got you to a point where you're not processing through your emotions as a child, that's not benign. And
Mm-mm.
the way that I like to say this is that if you don't work through the traumatic parts of your life, they're just going to work through you, right? Like like they're going to work themselves, like you're going to work out your trauma in one way or another. You're
Mm.
going to experience those feelings in one way or another. All of us know that this is the pressure cooker, like especially men. Like
Yeah.
we know that this is the pressure cooker. So many horrible aspects of, unfortunate side effects of male culture, whether it's domestic violence or whatever. Like the pressure cooker that builds these things is you never expressed any of your feelings, and eventually your feelings started expressing you. Like
Mm.
they started just like, and does that look like masculine, positive, integrated life, to
Mm.
just be run by your emotions
Mm.
because you're unwilling to experience them? I mean, that to me is like so laughable. Men all the time get on my videos and they're like, this is such a pansy way of raising kids, and this is
Right.
such a this, and oh, like everybody's feelings these days, facts don't care about your feelings. Like, and all I want to say is like, yeah, this is, you're on somebody's Instagram video or TikTok video or Facebook video or whatever, like ranting at a person that you
Yeah.
don't know. This is what it looks like to be run by your emotions.
Yeah. Well, and also it's all, I think, to take it a step further, emotions also, it's like that's the narrative. It's the story he has to probably tell himself to convince him that he's normal.
Right.
Because to admit for him, and this is where I'm kind of been working on and research I've been doing, and possibly like, books that a book that I'm working on. We just talked about this in the green room. Um, is that to say otherwise is a threat to my nervous system. To say that, hey, what
Yep.
John is saying might be more correct and accurate and healthy, but I can't say that, because that to say that that's more true or aligned and more healthy is, in a way, I've had to, my nervous system, my body subconsciously has to see that as a threat. And so the only
Mm-hmm.
way I have to deal with a threat is what? Fight, flight, freeze, right? Shut down. So I'm going to fight that. So my fighting is, hey, that's wussy, pansy, whatever, because I have to convince myself so strongly, because that's what I tell myself. And it's like, that's the catch 22, is that in a way he's got to perpetuate that belief, because that's what he had to do. And so when I see this video, it's probably pulling something,
Oh,
right? I
it's
guarantee
deeply
you.
triggering.
And it's like, but he was left because there was no one there to like say, hey, your dad yelling at you is wrong, or hey, your mom hitting you is wrong. Like there was no one there to step in and offer protection or guidance or wisdom. So I had to convince myself that this is whatever A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because that's like what I've known, you
That's
know?
such a good point. And just to say, a huge section of what I talk about, a major part of a book that I've written, and will come out in January of 25 if somehow you're listening to this then.
TBD.
Yeah, TBD. It'll come out in January 25, so get ready. Uh get on my email list and you'll get the link. There you go. When it comes out, just don't unsubscribe. Um a big part of that, one of my main chapters is about reconciliation repair. And one of the
Mm.
things I point to there is, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, okay, but I'm 55. What do I do now? My kids are
Mm.
20. My kids are 17. Is it too late? I've been yelling at them since they were 2.
It's not too late.
How powerful would it be for you, Travis, me, John, anybody listening, as an adult, even if your
Totally.
parents, 30 years older than you, 40 years older than you, whatever, called you up on the phone tomorrow and said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, when you were a kid, I yelled a lot,
Mm.
or I spanked you, or I had this, or I had that. And I was listening to this podcast, or I was reading this book, or I was on social media. And, I was really convicted
Mm.
that I probably didn't need to do that stuff. And that was more about me than it was about you. And you really were a really good kid. And I should have been more careful, and I should have done my self work. And I'm going to work on that. And so you don't have to worry about that with your grandkids, or with my grandkids, with your kids, because I am doing that work. And that was not okay that I did that. And I hope that you can find a way to forgive me for that. You're going to tell me that it would be too late for you? Like that happened at 30 years old, would that be too late? Like,
No.
no. So if your kid's 16, 17, 18, 25, 50 years old, you can
No.
always be that person. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be someone else to
No, it
say
doesn't.
your dad yelled at you. It can be your dad. And if you're going to sit around and wait for that to happen, oh, my parents will never do that. You're right. There's a good chance that your
Yeah.
parents will
Some
never.
won't, but some
Your
do.
parents, but many will. And be the type of person who looks at the integrated people apologize. That's one thing I'll say. If we're talking about
Yeah.
integrated people,
Yeah.
integrated men know how to apologize, because
Totally.
they're not so defensive.
No.
And that's one of the things. People are so afraid to apologize in general. I think men are most afraid to apologize to their kids
Yeah.
because it threatens their sense of I'm the king, I'm
Sure.
the CEO of this family, I'm the president of this family. Instead of doing all that, realize that the best leaders are the ones who take accountability.
And I can speak to that personally, John, because my dad, I didn't talk to my dad for about 3 years. I wrote him a letter years ago. I won't go into the details, but essentially said, hey, having kids, I'm taking a step back due to some of the behaviors and decisions you're making. Just not healthy,
Mm.
not going to be around it. Long story short, 3 years later, after that, my dad essentially called me up. We went to Starbucks. I know exactly. It was right before Thanksgiving. I think a week before Thanksgiving, 20, maybe 2019. No, 2019, 2019, I think, right before the pandemic. Or no, year
Mhm.
before the pandemic, 2018. And it was the first time he sat down, I remember, and he apologized for things without any type of blame or manipulation. And
Mm.
it was the very first time, like, it was just like this genuine um, conversation. And there was a part of me that did not want to, like, did not trust it at all. And I think I had very good reasons not to believe it.
Sure.
But another part of me that was like, yes, I've been longing for this moment forever. And
Mm.
I'll be 40 this year. I think I was 34, I think, when we first had in
Mhm.
conversation, 35. And then the next time I talked to him was like 6 months after that. We talked more openly again. He owned up to some stuff. And then 6 months later, it was really, really slow process. And then we started having more regular conversations. And I'll tell you what, he became an integrated man, healthy,
Mm.
a lot of his own healing work, very aware. And I mean, this is like 6 years later. Gosh, we're probably the closest we've ever been,
Wow.
um, because of the work he's done and also my willingness to listen. I think it was both and. Now,
Yeah.
by the way, that I got to a place of acceptance, thinking, you know what, I may never have a kind of relationship with my father ever again that I would want. And I got to a place of kind of acceptance of being okay and not being so stuck in the loss and the pain. I had to grieve that for
Sure.
a while. And I felt really at peace about it, saying, like, I know I'm doing the right thing. But then it shifted and I had to get challenged again and open myself up. And there was some hesitation there because I didn't want to get hurt. But I just wanted to
Yep.
share that I know that the reality is, man, when I hear people in my office, really what we're longing for, we all want that. If we could, I would say most people in my office would say, yeah, I want my parent to say that. That's what I've been wanting my whole life, right? Because there's this natural wiring to want that,
Yeah.
um, to
When
be
you can't
healed, to be
control
close.
other people's actions, like
No.
this is the acceptance, right?
Yeah.
And this is the thing. And thank you for sharing that. That's a powerful story of that speaks to the efficacy of this. And thank you also for mentioning that this wasn't like a Hallmark movie where he said I'm sorry and then he
No.
came to Thanksgiving a week later. You know
No.
what I mean? Like it's a process,
It was
and
a
it's
process.
and it's
And for my wife
years
too. That's another thing.
for
It was a
sure.
process for my wife, differently than mine.
Sure.
She had to go through she didn't have to. She chose to because she saw the impact on me, but she was more hesitant because she saw the pain it caused me from her perspective. She's like, I don't want that for you. So she was way more hesitant. And
Yeah.
and I respect that.
Yeah.
Totally
But
respect
that's
that.
part of, that's the thing is that both of you and your father had to choose vulnerability.
Yeah, oh
And
big
this
time.
is the thing, that integrated people can do that non-integrated people, at least from my perspective, cannot do,
Mm,
is that when you are afraid
mm,
of everything, which is really what the feeling of disintegration is, right? Like it's fear at its
mm,
core, not to like, go all like super alpha male and everything is fear that's a problem in your life, but like it's you're afraid. You're afraid to open yourself up. You're afraid of this. You're afraid of that. And fear is good to many extents because fear is what stops you from grabbing the cast iron pan out of the stove. Fear is the thing that puts your coat on before you go out in the cold, not just because it might be cold, but because you realize your car could break down, right? Like there's healthy
yeah.
fear. The fear is the reason that all of us have smoke alarms in our house, and that's a good thing. Fear's the reason I wear a seatbelt, and that's a good thing. That's my body protecting me. But when we're so afraid of everything, when we're
Right.
living in a perpetual state of disintegration because we've been hurt and we have not
Mm,
processed through that hurt, we've not gone through it, we've not done the work, then we lack an ability to be vulnerable. And I'm sure you know this as much as anyone, but certainly something that I'm always learning about is how that opening yourself up to vulnerability is actually opening yourself up to the fullest life that you can.
mm,
That when you choose to I call it having a customs office of emotions.
Hmm.
Like when you have a customs, the customs office of emotions, where every emotion has to be checked and patted down before it comes through your body, then
Hmm.
then they all kind of lose. None of them are quite as vibrant. To truly live an integrated, full, joyful life, both with your kids and with your spouse and with yourself, you have to be willing to be hurt. Like, and if you're not willing to be hurt, then you won't really feel joy. And
Yeah.
that's like one of those kind of ancient wisdom teachings that's so kind of
Hmm.
important. But if there's one thing about integration, it's, integrated people apologize. Also, integrated people have the vulnerability to be able to apologize, which I think so
Yeah.
many of us, we're so afraid. So many people are afraid that they're messing up as a parent, that they're terrified that they'll to apologize to their kid. And that, don't live in fear.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. Probably.
Yeah. And the point you made is very important, that it's not, we have to get away from the hallmark moment that movies make. The reality is it's a journey, and it takes time. And that journey is an ongoing process. Even for me at the time, it was an ongoing process of, okay, am I going to trust, and how much am I going to trust my dad at this
Mm-hmm.
moment in this next conversation? What has he shown me? What has his behavioral differences been? Has he been consistent? What's he
Mm-hmm.
saying? How is he saying? Like, really aware, and noticing myself too. Like, what's going on for me in these conversations? Am I defensive? Am I feeling, rushing the judgment? Am I, like, it's kind of really this constant awareness and evaluation and assessing, where am I right now? Am I actually present, or am I already prejudging? Like, these are things that were happening in the moment.
Right.
And it was a process, and integration is to some degree, it's a lifelong process of being integrated, I would say. Um, I don't know. I don't know if you're ever like done, right? Or there, right? It's,
No.
you know,
Yeah.
I can't say that with certainty. I think it's ongoing. I think,
Well, yeah, I think, practice makes better is kind of
yeah.
my thing. And so, just to even identify all of the things that you just named, right? The metacognition,
Hmm.
the introspective self-awareness, the emotional attunement with yourself. Like all of these things are not things that Travis developed instantly overnight. Like these
No.
are things that develop over years. And
Yeah.
and in order to be in such a high leverage situation with a parent of all people. I mean, we lack boundaries with all sorts of people in the world. We
Parents are the
lack
worst.
boundaries with our parents
Yeah. And
in
family.
really, really, yeah,
Yeah.
I would say parents are even worse because,
Yeah.
and the part of that is like literally we couldn't be boundaried from them.
No.
Like there had to be a time and a place of no boundaries. I mean, I don't want to alienate anyone who is adopted or is adopted, but there is also, like, think about it from a biological perspective. Like the majority of us, or all of us, were in our mother's wombs. There's no boundary there. We're
Mm-mm.
sharing blood and hormones. Like it's messy.
Mm-hmm.
And parenting is messy. And so to be in such a high leverage situation with a parent and to still have the presence of mind and self awareness to be able to do that metacognition and emotional attunement. I think that that's a testament to all the work that you did before that too.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that so many people probably listening are like, okay, well, I'm estranged from a family member or a, whatever, and I want to do this work. Yeah, let's crawl before we can run. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how about we like stop screaming at the person in the car next to us who just cut us off
Yeah.
before we try and like have a heart to heart with our estranged dad.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that that's the thing that a lot of people want to, in a microwave culture where everybody wants
Yeah.
things,
Instant. Yeah.
same day on Amazon. Like
Yeah.
it's really hard to tell people that, hey, this is going to be a process, not just of 2 years to becoming reunited with your estranged parent, but
Yeah.
also of the 3 years before that, the 6 years before that, of becoming emotionally aware and attuned enough.
Yeah.
And most people just frankly aren't. They're just coming home, they're overworked, they're exhausted, and they're not even able to start to practice, so they're never going to play.
Yeah.
And so all my encouragement to anybody listening is just practice now before you need it,
Yeah.
because this is the stuff that really matters, and it makes or breaks life.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I thank you for your kind words. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm gonna take that one for the day, and wear that. So I really do. And I agree. We live in a culture that, that resonates, that microwave the TikTok, it's the 30-second, it's the real culture, right? The 60-second
Yep.
culture. And the reality is relationships and health and integration is not that. It's anything but that. It's time, it's ups and downs, it's drudgery, it's pain, sorrows, victory. It's all those things. And I think the more people know that, and that's why I share it, is like, hey, this is the reality. And I did my own work. I did therapy before I became a therapist. And then I became a
Yep.
therapist. And I think that therapy degree even helped me. I mean, I'm still learning. Like you said, it's messy. I'm still aware and I still stumble, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is I get to share that on this platform different than in my office because I'm there for people I'm their therapist, right?
Right. Right.
Or I'm their coach. So it's a little different. But I get to talk here and they get to hear glimpses because I want them to know I'm a human at the first,
Right.
a human
Right.
being first. I happen to have a degree that helps me know things and tools. But the reality is, first and foremost, I'm a human being.
Yeah.
Um, and I have
Well,
feelings and like everybody else.
yeah, I think it's very I mean, the sharing a story is powerful, obviously within the right boundaried setting, right?
Yeah.
You can't do that in a therapy environment where it's a monodirectional
Yeah.
relationship. But I think it's important, and I just think that you just, even by saying it, right? Like, so many people, they don't even know that that's the place to begin.
Yeah.
That the place to begin is always going in, and is
Hmm.
always pausing to reflect. Like,
Yeah.
that's the hard work of like you said, the TikTok culture. People don't want to, nobody wants to take a break. And I'll just add one last piece. When you said the drudgery of the work, the first thing that I thought of was how, kind of circling back to where we started a little bit, but so many people, the reason that they can't even do the drudgery, the like the delving into the dredging up of their childhood and their emotional wounds and the metacognition, is because they're just too freaking tired. Like,
Mm.
they just aren't getting enough sleep. Like, if you want a place to start becoming integrated, eat better, sleep more,
Move a bit more
have
too. Movement. Yeah.
yeah, work out. I mean, like, these are basic things that you learned, or you should have learned in health class.
Yeah.
Connect with your partner, have sex. Like, these are the parts of you that have to be felt and met to an extent, right?
Hmm.
And so if you're not meeting those, and by the way, that might look like pouring into the intimacy with your partner first, right? And so they can look a lot of different ways, but ultimately what it all comes down to is, if your lower needs, so many people try and like read Atomic
Yeah.
Habits, right? They read Atomic Habits, or like, any of the other self-help books out there, of which I'm keenly aware I'm writing a self-help book. So like, it's whatever. But they read the self-help book and they go, you know what? I'm just going to jump to stage 10, and I'm going to do so on 4 hours of sleep, way overworked at a job that I hate, when I
Yeah.
just had 3 Big Macs this week,
Yeah.
and
And been
14
yeah.
shots of espresso, and
Yeah.
then I'm going to do the work.
And
Like,
a 12-pack last night.
in a 12-pack last night, when that I chased with 4.5 gummies, and that, and
Yeah.
here I, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And here I am going to
Yeah.
show up, and I'm going to fix
Yeah. It's
myself.
not gonna work.
Like, get out of your own head.
Mm.
Like, do the simple things first.
Mm.
Like, do the easy stuff. Do the hey, I'm just going to eat like more vegetables and sleep 8 hours a night. I
Yeah.
swear to you, if everybody ate more vegetables, drank more water, and slept 8 hours a night, 90% of your problems would be solved. And then you can actually do the work that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah. Because that
But
work is tiring and it takes energy and
you,
resources.
most people just want to come home and watch reality TV because it shuts your brain off. They don't want to
It's
listen to a podcast like this that's going to go
no.
deep, because it's too exhausting.
It's too
And
much
so if
work.
you're that person, just
Yeah.
be encouraged. I have been that person at different times. Travis, I'm sure you're that sometimes you do just come home and sit on the couch and do nothing. But
100%.
if you want to do this work, it
Yeah.
starts with taking impeccable care of yourself.
Yeah.
And then you can go.
Totally. And John, where can we find you?
You can find me at Whole Parent on all the
Whole
social
Parent.
media places.
With a W, everyone remind.
With a
Whole
W, Whole Parent with a W, and all the social media places. And yeah, check the link in my bio at any of those places for my podcast.
Yes.
I release 2 episodes a week, all about parenting. I just answer parent questions. That's a really exciting thing that I'm doing. And make sure you join the email list, because you'll be reminded about the podcast. I don't spam people. I send basically 1 email a week on Thursdays, chock full of great parenting content. If you want to become a more integrated parent and a more wholehearted parent, this is your place, especially if you have a guy in your life. That I'm not saying that I speak only to men. In fact, the vast majority of my following is still women, but I take home a pretty good percentage of men compared to most other parenting people. So if you have a guy in your life who you
Yeah.
want to encourage to parent a little differently,
Yeah.
punishment-free parenting, that type of radical stuff, please hit me up at Whole Parent.
Yes, please do. And everyone listening, links will be in the description of the podcast, as well as if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll all be clickable for you to click on directly to Jon. Jon, blessings. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Travis.